Let's talk about this Biden Inflation Reduction Act. 85% of the bill pertains to climate change, not reducing inflation. And according to Bjorn Lomborg, president of the Copenhagen Consensus Center, author of the book False Alarm: How Climate Change Panic Costs Us Trillions, Hurts the Poor, and Fails to Fix the Planet, he says the effect of this bill on climate will be statistically indistinguishable from zero. He says that this will reduce global temperature by a grand total of 0.00009 degrees. In other words, next to nothing. And here's the problem. The costs of these climate policies outweigh their benefits, according to a piece by Mark Thiessen in the Washington Post. Even if Democrats pass the left's entire Green New Deal with World War II levels of government climate spending, it would still not put a dent in global temperatures. Bjorn Lomborg says this: most people don't appreciate how enormous cuts are needed to make substantial temperature reductions, even if the U.S. went entirely net zero today. For the rest of the century, an almost unfathomably costly policy, it would reduce global temperatures in 2100 by just 0.3 degrees Fahrenheit. But that's not what the Green New Deal proponents are telling people. Biden called this, quote, the biggest step forward on climate ever, close quote. And Al Gore called it a critical turning point in our struggle to confront the climate crisis, close quote. By the way, Al Gore is the one who said, I think it was 2006, in 10 years, we'll all be dust if we don't deal with climate. We're still here. By the way, hit like, hit subscribe, and click on the description below, and that way you'll be getting our mailing list. Why? Well, because YouTube has yet again been banning videos we tried to post. So if you want to get the Larry Elder Show unrestricted, without being banned, without being shafted by YouTube, click on the description and sign up so you can get our email list, okay? Now, when we come back, California banning gasoline-powered cars by 2035. What could possibly go wrong? Ron Stein will be up in just a second. Don't go away. Stein is back. He is an engineer. He frequently comes on the program to talk about things like electric-powered vehicles. And you wrote a piece called Inflation Reduction Act Will Hinder EV Growth. But Ron, I want to first get to the big news. California is banning gasoline-powered cars effective 2035. What could possibly, Ron, go wrong?
Well, it's interesting that the Air Resources Board is passing this law. Basically, they're supporting the environmental degradation and humanity atrocities in these developing countries that are mining for this lithium. And, we're not going to mine for it here. And that's why the Inflation Reduction Act...
Ron, explain what the lithium is and how it's necessary for these EVs to even work.
The EV batteries are primarily lithium-ion batteries, and the Tesla battery contains about 25 pounds of lithium. Your iPhone requires milligrams, but 25 pounds of lithium for a small battery. The bigger the car, the bigger the battery. And that lithium is coming from countries that have yellow skin, brown skin, black skin people. They're being exploited because they got no environmental laws and no labor laws. And it's atrocious that the Air Resources Board is basically supporting this environmental degradation going on around the world. And so that's one of the things going on. The other thing is the supply of lithium is disappearing quickly because one of the biggest locations is Chile. They got like 55% of the world's known deposits of lithium, and the Chilean Supreme Court basically shut that plant down. And the European Union they're about to classify either later this year or by first of next year is lithium as being a health hazard for humans. And the supply of lithium is disappearing quickly. So I don't know what the auto industry is going to do. They're making EVs. I don't know what they're going to use for batteries.
Ron, some of the objections of California banning gasoline-powered cars is that EVs are more expensive than gasoline-powered cars.
Larry, you're 100% correct. If you take a look at the profile of the EV owner, they are highly educated, high-income people, multi-car families, and they have a house, and they use the car for limited mileage. The average EV owner in California is using the car for like 5,000 miles a year. They drive as much as they drive their Lamborghinis. And, the most of the population is not a multi-car family. They got one workhorse vehicle, and they don't have a house to charge it in. And so, yeah, it's going to be devastating for the people that, with all the inflation and shortages going on, they can barely put food on the table and pay their rent and utilities. And now you want them to force them to buy a new car and force them to buy a new car that's an expensive car that may not be the workhorse. Mm-hmm. That's going to be very interesting.
You also mentioned mileage. The EVs have much more limited range. And another objection is in the event that there's some sort of natural disaster, like fires or like earthquakes, the first responders might have difficulty getting to the places they need to get to.
Exactly, yeah. And also in warmer climates, you want your air conditioning running, which runs off the battery. In colder climates, you want the heater running, which runs off the battery. And yeah, it's, range anxiety is a major impediment to the vehicles. And, you can't gas it up in 5 minutes. You can't get a gallon of electricity and put it in the car. That's not going to happen. And so, yeah, it's a big impediment to the, I think I've told you, Larry, since I wrote the book, Clean Energy Exploitations, which talks about all the environmental degradation, humanity atrocities occurring around the world. I have personally made the decision, me personally, I won't buy an EV because I know where the lithium is coming from. And I will not financially support that degradation and, atrocities going on around the world, exploiting people that, can't afford to speak up for themselves.
Ron, if everybody in California is forced to go to an EV, what does that do to the electricity grid of California?
The electricity grid in California, which is going to be running on breezes and sunshine, I think you can answer that yourself. It's going to be atrocious because they're shutting down all the power plants. They're talking about keeping the nuclear plant running because breezes and sunshine. That's going to be atrocious. The battery storage technology is nowhere near what we need it to be. And if you want continuous uninterruptible power to operate, it's not going to come from batteries. And if the breezes and sunshine is not there, you've got nothing. So it's going to be tough.
Now, Ron, you've also explained to us that this is supposed to be zero emissions when in fact the electricity is generated via fossil fuels. So the emissions are shifting from California to wherever it is that the electricity is being generated with these fossil fuels.
In addition, the vehicle is made with fossil fuels. All the plastics, all the electronic made with fossil fuels. They want to get rid of crude oil, but getting rid of crude oil, you have to understand that all the parts of wind turbines, all the parts of solar panels, all the parts of vehicles are made with the oil derivatives manufactured from crude oil. So you get rid of crude oil, you get rid of wind turbines, you get rid of solar panels, you get rid of vehicles. Larry, we're back to the 1800s. I'm not ready to go there.
Ron, you've told us this before, and I've asked you this question. I'm going to ask it again. Has anybody from Gavin Newsom's various departments having to do with fighting climate change had any kind of conversation with you at all, ever?
Never. No, I'd love to have a face-to-face interview, a face-to-face discussion, not a speech. I don't want to hear him give a speech to me. Same thing with AOC. Like I said, they just don't understand the unintended consequences.
You've written a book called Clean Energy Exploitations. It just seems to me that if I read your book, even if I were a climate change alarmist, it would raise some flags. I pick up the horn and I would call Ron Stein and say, tell me more.
Exactly. That's why it was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. Not because of the English, because I'm still trying to master the English language, but the message. The message is, it's just, we're exploiting people, and we're doing it because they're out of sight. It's okay. But if we do it here, like the Inflation Reduction Act, they want the lithium to be mined in the United States. Larry, you're not going to have a lithium mine in your backyard. No one is. And so it's okay if it's out of sight. We leak it to someone else. And they've got no emission controls and no environmental regulations. It's okay if it's done over there, but don't do it here. And it's atrocious. And it's amazing that the Air Resources Board is supporting that.
Well, that's the other point that you've made. You said if California went to zero emissions, if America went to zero emissions, if Great Britain went to zero emissions, if Germany went to zero emissions, it would have zero effect on the climate because of the coal-powered plants in places like China and in India.
Exactly. Yeah, you can take all the people in America, the UK, Germany, Australia, take everybody, wipe them off the face of the earth, wipe all the manufacturing off the face of the earth. And the result is going to be emissions are going to explode. China and India has thousands of coal-fired power plants, and they're building thousands more, as well as Africa. And so, cleaning up our backyard at the expense of the citizens have to pay for this. Yeah, it's not going to happen. Like I say, we're going to have a nice clean backyard. I firmly believe Newsom believes he only breathes California air. Doesn't breathe it, but nobody else is there. So he don't care if they're polluting over there. He doesn't breathe that air. He don't even breathe our air. So
I saw a list of things that concern Americans, and I think climate change was at 1%. However, a much larger percentage of Democrats are concerned about climate change. This is a political question, not an engineering question, Ron. Why is it that Democrats are so concerned about climate change as opposed to independents and Republicans?
I think it creates fear factors, and they get a lot of press when they talk about injecting fear. The news media does the same thing. Fear gets them readership and viewership, and like I say, it's a great thing to talk about. But Larry, the climate's been changing for billions of years. When you take a look at the last ice age, I think the ice came south of St. Louis, and as it retracted, as the warming cycle, got rid of the ice. And by the way, nobody lived on Earth at that time. I'm not sure why the ice melted. It wasn't man-made emissions. Right. And we formed the Great Lakes. and those 5 Great Lakes, believe it or not, they contain 20% of the entire world's fresh water developed by melting glaciers. The Grand Canyon was developed by receding glaciers. And you can count on your hand the number of humans lived on Earth at that time. So, climate change is happening. It's going to continue to happen. Humans are very adaptive. We can adapt to anything, especially now. We can live in any kind of climate with air conditioning and heating, in clothing. We could live on the top of Mount Everest and survive. But, humans are pretty adaptive. And but getting rid of fossil fuels, since we went from 1 to 8 billion people in less than 200 years, that's going to be the greatest threat to civilization, not climate change.
You mentioned that the people that own EVs are disproportionately wealthy. These are the ones that are going to be getting the student loan forgiveness benefits as well. So win-win for white supremacy.
Hallelujah.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you, Larry. Have a great day.
Now, electric cars are failing miserably in ordinary driving situations. Speaking of California, the Governor Gavin Newsom has mandated a ban on gasoline-powered cars effective 2035. I kid you not. A ban on gasoline-powered cars effective 2035. There's a piece called How Electric Cars Fail Miserably in Ordinary Driving Situations in WorldNet Daily. Here in the upper Midwest, interstates are fast, winter's cold, speeds north of 70 miles an hour combined with near zero temperatures wreak havoc on an electric vehicle's range. While a typical internal combustion engine might suffer a 10 to 15% reduction in highway driving range under these conditions, a typical EV currently on the market will have its range dip anywhere from 30 to 50%. So you're thinking about a winter road trip, visiting relatives in Christmas, Thanksgiving, in a shorter range EV like a Kona, a Bolt, a Leaf, or Nero. Forget about it. Worse, the problem of drastically reduced driving range is because of the poor charging infrastructure along the highways of the upper Midwest. DC fast chargers are few and far between, and when you get one, there's a decent chance it will not work. Now, speaking of climate change forecasts, check out this one. This is Joe Biden. We can't wait to tackle the climate crisis. The signs are unmistakable, the science undeniable, and the cost of inaction keeps mounting. Joe Biden 2021. Here is AOC 2019. The world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. Vice President Al Gore 2006. Unless drastic measures to reduce greenhouse gases are taken within the next 10 years, the world will reach a point of no return. Now, Al Gore said that in 2006. It is now 2022. How about this one? This is Associated Press, June 29, 1989. Headline: UN predicts disaster if global warming is not checked. A senior UN official says entire nations could be wiped off the face of the earth by rising sea levels if the global warming trend is not reversed by the year 2000. Again, this is 2022. So I'm speaking to you from the grave, I guess. This is Dr. George Wald. He is a Nobel-winning scientist. He studied pigments in retina, eyes. Civilization will end within 15 to 30 years unless immediate action is taken. Again, that was said in 1970. So what's that? 52 years ago? Here's one. This was in 1967. Dire famine by 1975. LA Times. It is already too late for the world to avoid a long period of famine, a Stanford University biologist said Thursday. Paul Ehrlich said the time of famines is upon us and will be at its worst and most disastrous by 1965. Again, this was written in 1967, and we're somehow still here. New York Times, August 10, 1969. Foes of pollution seize lack of time. Quote, the trouble with almost all environmental problems, says Paul R. Ehrlich, the population biologist, is that by the time we have enough evidence to convince people, you're dead. So if you're watching this video, you're dead. Here is again, Boston Globe, 1970. Scientist predicts a new ice age by the 21st century. Air pollution may obliterate the sun and cause a new ice age in the first third of the next century. We're in that first third of the next century. And somehow, I thought we're worried about global warming. 1971, Washington Post. U.S. scientist sees new ice age coming. The world could be as little as 50 or 60 years away from a disastrous new ice age, a leading atmospheric scientist predicts. In the next 50 years, the fine dust man constantly puts into the atmosphere by fossil fuel burning could screen out so much sunlight that the average temperature could drop by 6 degrees. Yet now we're talking about temperatures rising, even though this scientist in 1971 said by this time our temperatures would be dropping. Good thing they're not paid by the reliability of their forecast, isn't it? Hope you enjoyed that video. The full show is available to watch right now on Epoch TV. Just click the link in the description below to learn more, because we've got a country to save.